You have probably never heard of it. You have driven across the country on interstates, on four-lane highways, on smooth asphalt that cuts straight through mountains and over rivers. You have probably never given a second thought to the first road that made all of that possible. But before there was an Interstate 40, before there was a Route 66, before there was even a transcontinental railroad, there was a single, narrow ribbon of crushed stone and packed earth that stretched from the Atlantic seaboard all the way to the edge of the American frontier. It was a road that was supposed to bind a young nation together. It was a road that became the main artery for the greatest migration in American history. And then, within a single generation, it was forgotten. This is the story of the National Road, the first highway built by the United States government, the forgotten highway that opened the American West. Imagine the year 1811. The United States is barely a generation old. The original 13 states hug the coast, and beyond the Appalachian Mountains lies a vast, untamed wilderness. A few scattered settlements dot the Ohio River Valley, but there is no reliable way to get there from the East Coast. A farmer in Maryland who wants to move his family to the rich farmland of Ohio has two choices. He can load everything onto a Conestoga wagon and try to follow a rough, muddy trail through the mountains, a journey that takes weeks and often ends with broken axles and stranded families. Or he can take the longer, safer, but much more expensive route, sailing down the Atlantic coast, around Florida, and up the Mississippi River. Neither option is good. The nation needs a road, not a dirt path, not a horse track. A real road, wide enough for wagons, hard enough to handle rain, and direct enough to cut the travel time from months to weeks. The idea had been floating around since the days of Thomas Jefferson. The Constitution gave the federal government the power to establish post roads, and in 1806, Congress authorized the construction of a national road from Cumberland, Maryland, to the Ohio River at Wheeling, in what is now West Virginia. It was a bold and controversial project. Many people believed the federal government had no business building roads. They said it was a state matter, or better left to private companies. But President Jefferson signed the bill anyway, and the work began. The road would be built to a standard that had never been seen in America. 66 feet wide, with a 30-foot wide surface of broken stone laid in a convex shape so that water would drain off. Stone culverts would carry streams under the road. Bridges would cross every river. It was a massive engineering project, and it would be the finest road in the entire country. The first section, from Cumberland to the town of Uniontown in Pennsylvania, was completed in 1818. Teams of men with picks, shovels, and horse-drawn carts cut a path through the rugged Allegheny Mountains. They blasted rock. They filled ravines. They built stone arch bridges that still stand today. The road rose and fell with the ridges, climbing to passes that offered breathtaking views of the endless forest. And when it was finished, the effect was immediate. Settlers began to pour over the mountains in numbers that no one had imagined. The National Road became the Great Western Highway. By the 1820s, you could stand on the road at any point and see a continuous line of covered wagons stretching as far as the eye could see. Families, merchants, tradesmen, immigrants, all of them headed west. They carried everything they owned in those wagons: beds, chairs, pots, pans, plows, seeds, chickens, children. The road was crowded, noisy, and dangerous. Accidents were common. Wagon wheels broke. Horses threw shoes. Men died from disease or injury far from any doctor. But the road kept pulling them forward. The National Road reached Wheeling in 1818, and then it kept going. The government extended it across Ohio, through Columbus, and into Indiana. By 1834, it reached Indianapolis. By 1839, it was in Vandalia, Illinois, the state capital at the time. The plan had been to push all the way to the Mississippi River, to St. Louis, to the very edge of the American frontier. But the money ran out. The federal government turned the road over to the states, and the states did not have the funds to maintain it. The great national road began to decay. The stone surface cracked and crumbled. Weeds grew through the gravel. Bridges rotted, and then the railroads came. The steam locomotive was faster, cheaper, and more reliable than any wagon. Within a decade, the national road was reduced to a local road, used mostly by farmers hauling crops to nearby towns. The long-distance travelers vanished. The grand vision of a national highway faded into memory, but the road did not disappear. It still exists in pieces. Parts of it became U.S. Route 40, the famous highway that once ran from Atlantic City to San Francisco. Other parts became state roads and county roads, winding through small towns that grew up along the old route. If you know where to look, you can still find stretches of the original stone surface, hidden under layers of asphalt. You can find the old stone mile markers, still standing after 200 years. You can find the brick-faced taverns and inns that used to welcome weary travelers. The National Road is still there if you know how to see it, and if you listen closely, in the quiet of a winter evening, you can almost hear the creak of wagon wheels and the low murmur of families talking as they roll westward into the unknown. The National Road was more than a road. It was a promise that the American continent could be crossed, a promise that the wilderness could be tamed, a promise that a better life lay just over the next ridge. It was the first link in a chain that would eventually become the interstate highway system, the greatest network of roads ever built by human hands. But the National Road itself is largely forgotten. History books mention it in a paragraph or two. Tourists speed past its remnants on modern highways, unaware that they are following the exact path that millions of Americans took when they set out to build a new nation. That is why we are telling its story now, because the road that opened the West deserves to be remembered. Let us go back to the very beginning. Let us stand on the outskirts of Cumberland, Maryland, in the year 1811, and watch the first surveyors marking out the line of the road. The mountains loom ahead, blue and hazy in the distance. The surveyor, a man named Joseph Shriver, is a tough, practical man who has spent years mapping the wilderness. He knows that this road will change everything. He knows that it will unleash a flood of people into the Ohio Valley. He knows that it will destroy the way of life of the Native Americans who have lived here for centuries. He knows all of this, and he does not hesitate. He marks the line, and the work begins. The construction of the National Road was a triumph of human will over nature. The workers were mostly Irish immigrants, recent arrivals from a country that was then part of the United Kingdom. They lived in makeshift camps alongside the road. They worked from dawn to dusk, 6 days a week, for wages of about $1 a day. They drank whiskey, they fought, they died in accidents or from disease, and they built a road that would last for generations. The roadbed was made of broken stone, laid in 3 layers. The bottom layer was large stones about 6 inches in diameter. The middle layer was smaller stones about 3 inches. The top layer was a fine gravel, almost like sand. When a heavy wagon rolled over it, the stones would settle and lock together into a hard, durable surface. It was a technique the Romans had used 2,000 years earlier. It worked just as well in the forests of Pennsylvania. The road was not just a strip of stone. It was an entire system. Every mile or so, a stone milepost marked the distance from Cumberland. At regular intervals, there were toll houses. Yes, the National Road was a toll road, even though it was built by the federal government. The tolls were collected to pay for maintenance. A wagon with 4 horses paid about 12.5 cents for every 10 miles. A man on horseback paid 6 cents. A herd of cattle paid 3 cents for every 10 head. It was expensive, but far cheaper than the alternatives. And the tolls kept the road in good condition for decades. Traveling the National Road was an adventure. You would leave Cumberland in the early morning, your wagon loaded with supplies. The road climbed steeply up Will's Mountain, the first of many ridges. The horses strained, the wheels creaked. You could look back and see the town of Cumberland shrinking in the valley below. Then you reached the top, and the road leveled out for a while, running along the ridgeline. The air was cool and clear. The forest stretched to the horizon. It was beautiful, but you could not stop to admire the view. You had to keep moving. There were mountains still to cross. There was the Poor Farm Ridge. Then the Mason and Dixon Line. Then the Castleman River. Then Laurel Hill. Then Chestnut Ridge. Each one a new challenge. Each one a new blessing when you reached the summit and saw the next valley below. The road passed through towns that grew up because of it. Uniontown, Pennsylvania, where the road turned west. Brownsville on the Monongahela River, where you could switch from a wagon to a flatboat and float down the Ohio. Washington, Pennsylvania, a bustling market town. Wheeling, the end of the first section, a city that rose from a small settlement to a major transportation hub in just a few years. The National Road created prosperity. It created connections. It created a nation. And yet, within 50 years, the road was obsolete. The railroads were faster. The railroads were cheaper. The railroads could carry more freight and more people. The National Road became a local road, a farm-to-market road, a road for people who could not afford a train ticket. The grand highway that had opened the West was reduced to a quiet, dusty track, but the people who had traveled it did not forget. They built houses along it. They planted fields beside it. They buried their dead in cemeteries near it. The road became part of the landscape, part of the memory of 100,000 families. That memory is what we are trying to recover. In the next part of this story, we will follow the road westward across Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois. We will meet the people who traveled it. We will hear their voices, their hopes, their fears. We will see the road as it was in its golden age, and we will see it as it is today, a forgotten relic of a vanished era. Because the national road is not just a road, it is a story, and it is a story that deserves to be told. So let us now take that journey. We stand on the western bank of the Ohio River in Wheeling, Virginia in the year 1830. The national road has just reached this point, and the town is a chaos of wagons, horses, and people. The air smells of coal smoke and river mud. Merchants shout over the clatter of iron wheels on stone. Families huddle together, clutching blankets and Bibles, their eyes fixed on the horizon. They have come from Baltimore, from Philadelphia, from New York. They have crossed the Alleghenies, descended into the Ohio Valley, and now they stand at the edge of a vast, open land. The road stretches ahead, a ribbon of crushed stone and hope. The Ohio River is the great dividing line. East of it, the country is settled. Towns are close together. Farms are enclosed by fences. Churches stand on every hill. West of the river, the land opens up. The forests are thicker. The clearings are smaller. The settlements are farther apart. This is the frontier. This is where the national road truly begins its work. The wagons line up at the ferry, their teams of horses stamping impatiently. The ferrymen push off, and the boats glide across the brown current. On the far side, the road climbs out of the river bottom and into the rolling hills of Ohio. The first town of any size in Ohio is St. Clairsville, named for the governor of the Northwest Territory. It is a raw, rough place. The buildings are made of logs or rough-hewn planks. The streets are deep with mud after a rain, but there is a hotel, a blacksmith, a general store. Travelers stop here to rest and resupply. They eat salt pork and hardtack. They drink coffee brewed from roasted chicory. They pay for their meals with coins or with goods they have brought from the East. The tavern keeper writes down their names in a ledger, a record of the thousands who pass through. From St. Clairsville, the road runs westward through the Muskingum River Valley. The land is rich, black soil that grows corn and wheat as high as a man's shoulder. Farmers along the road sell their produce to the wagoners. They build sturdy barns and whitewashed houses. They raise large families. The road brings them prosperity, but it also brings strangers. Every day, new faces appear. Families from Germany, from Ireland, from Scotland. Men alone carrying packs and walking. Women with babies in their arms. Children who have never seen a city. They all come down the national road and they all carry the same dream. A piece of land, a roof over their heads, a future free from the crowded cities of the East. We reach Zanesville, a town that was laid out in 1797, but only began to grow after the road arrived. The town sits at a bend in the Muskingum River, and the road crosses the river on a covered bridge. The bridge is one of the longest in the country, nearly 400 feet. It is a marvel of engineering. The wooden trusses are held together with iron bolts and wooden pegs. The roof keeps the snow and rain off the road's surface. Inside, the bridge is dark and echoing. The sound of hooves and wheels bounces off the walls. You can smell the river below, the wet wood above, the breath of the horses. It is a moment of shelter before the open plains beyond. Beyond Zanesville, the road turns northwesterly toward Columbus. The land flattens, the forests thin out. You begin to see the prairie tall grass that waves in the wind like the sea. The road here is straight, laid out by surveyors who followed the lines of the old Indian trails. The mileposts tick by. 5 miles, 10, 20. The sky is enormous. The horizon is a line of blue. At night, the stars come out in a canopy so thick you can see the Milky Way like a river of silver light. The travelers camp beside the road, building fires of dried buffalo chips or driftwood. They sing songs. They tell stories. They pray, and in the morning, they start again. Columbus in 1830 is a small town, barely 20 years old. It was chosen as the state capital because it was centrally located, but it was still a village of wooden houses and muddy streets. The national road brought it to life. Merchants built stores along the road. Hotels sprang up to accommodate the endless flow of travelers. The city grew around the road like a vine around a trellis. Today, the road is called Broad Street, and it still runs through the heart of downtown. But then, it was the main artery of the state. Wagons lined up for blocks, waiting to cross the Scioto River. The ferrymen worked from dawn to dusk, and still the line never seemed to end. West of Columbus, the road enters the flatlands of central Ohio. This is the land of the Shawnee and the Wyandot, peoples who had been pushed out by treaties and by force. The road was built on their hunting grounds, on their burial mounds, on the paths their ancestors had walked for centuries. The travelers did not think about that. They were too busy thinking about the future, but the land remembers. The old mounds still stand, covered in grass, silent. The road passes within sight of them. The wagon wheels grind over the grass. The children stare at the strange green hills. No one explains what they are. The road moves on. The next major stop is Springfield, Ohio, a town that grew up around a gristmill and a tavern. The national road brought farmers from the surrounding countryside, and the town became a market center. Corn, wheat, pork, whiskey, all of it flowed east on the road, and all of the money flowed back west. Springfield was a place where a man could start over. Many did. They bought land, built houses, raised families. Their children went to school, learned to read, wrote letters to relatives still in the east. The road connected them. It made the vast country smaller. And then the road crosses into Indiana. The line between Ohio and Indiana is marked by a stone post, just like the mileposts, but there is a difference. Indiana in 1830 is still a raw, wild place. The forests are thicker. The swamps are more frequent. The mosquitoes are thicker than anywhere else. The road here was not as well built. The stone surface was laid more thinly. The bridges were less sturdy. The toll houses were fewer. The state of Indiana could not afford to maintain the road as well as Ohio could, so the travelers suffered. Wagons bogged down in the mud. Axles broke. Horses died, but still they came. Richmond, Indiana is the first town of any size. It is a Quaker settlement founded by people who had come from North Carolina and Pennsylvania to escape slavery. The Quakers were quiet, hardworking people. They built a meeting house, a school, a mill. They treated everyone with kindness, even the rowdy wagoners who drank and swore. The national road passed right through the center of their town. They welcomed the travelers. They sold them food and shelter. They helped them repair their wagons, and they watched the endless parade of humanity roll westward. From Richmond, the road runs straight as a string to Indianapolis. The land is flat, so flat that the surveyors barely had to curve the line. The road is a straight line across the prairie mile after mile. The only breaks are the creeks and rivers, each one crossed by a wooden bridge. The travelers counted the bridges. They marked the miles. They dreamed of the next town. The road was monotonous, but it was also beautiful. The tall grass swayed in the wind. The sky went on forever. The solitude was immense. And then in the distance, you would see the smoke of Indianapolis. Indianapolis in 1835 is a city of 5,000 people, but it is growing fast. The national road is the reason. The city was laid out in a grid with a central circle that was meant to be the seat of government. The road enters from the east, becomes Washington Street, and runs straight through the center of the city. The governor's residence is on the road. The state house is on the road. The best hotels are on the road. Everything in Indianapolis faces the national road. It is the spine of the city, the artery that keeps it alive. But even as the city grows, the road is already showing signs of strain. The traffic is heavy. The road surface wears out quickly. The tolls are not enough to pay for repairs. The state government argues about what to do. Some want to privatize the road. Others want to ask Congress for more money. But Congress has already turned its back. The road is a state problem now. And the states are poor. The road begins to deteriorate even as more wagons roll over it. We follow the road out of Indianapolis, heading west toward Terre Haute. The land here is flat and marshy. The road is built on a raised embankment like a causeway. The water stands in ditches on either side. The mosquitoes swarm in clouds. The travelers cover their faces with cloth. They burn sage and tobacco to keep the insects away. It is a miserable stretch, but beyond Terre Haute the land rises again. The prairie is dry and open. The sun beats down. The grass turns yellow in late summer. The road is dusty, and the wagons kick up clouds that settle on everything. Terre Haute is named for its location on the Wabash River. The town is a bustling port where goods from the road are transferred to riverboats. The Wabash flows to the Ohio, and the Ohio flows to the Mississippi. For a moment, the national road connects with the great river system that drains the continent. The travelers have a choice. They can continue overland or they can take a boat. Many choose the boat. It is faster. It is easier. The road loses some of its importance. But for those who stay on land, the road continues. And then we reach Illinois. The state line is a small stream, the Wabash River. The road crosses on a ferry or in dry weather on a ford. The Illinois side is different. The land is even flatter. The soil is even richer. The prairie stretches to the horizon, unbroken by trees. The road here was built by the federal government, but it was never completed. The money ran out at Vandalia, the state capital. And so the road ends not at the Mississippi, but at a small town in the middle of the prairie. Vandalia is a disappointment. It is a small town with a wooden state house and a few brick buildings. The road brings some trade, but not enough. The capital will soon move to Springfield. The town will decline. The road will become a local road. The great national highway, the road that was supposed to reach the Mississippi and open the entire continent, stops here. The travelers who want to go further must find their own way. Some follow the old Indian traces, some hire guides, some just strike out across the prairie, following the stars. But even in its incompleteness, the national road changed everything. It created a corridor of settlement that stretched from Maryland to Illinois. It brought people, goods, and ideas across the mountains. It tied the East to the West. It made the United States a single country, connected by a ribbon of stone. The road is old now. Parts of it are buried under asphalt. Parts of it are forgotten. But if you drive along US Route 40, you are following the same path. You are crossing the same ridges, fording the same rivers, passing through the same towns. The road is still there. It is waiting. And it still has stories to tell. And yet, the road did not truly end at Vandalia. The dream of a highway to the Mississippi, to the very edge of the West, was too powerful to let die. The road may have stopped as a federal project, but the movement it started did not stop. The wagons kept rolling. The settlers kept walking. The road became a state road, then a county road, then a patchwork of local roads that still pointed west. Farmers extended their own lanes. Towns built their own connections. The line of the national road, that invisible thread across the continent, was picked up by hands that had no funding from Congress, no surveyors, no stone mileposts. They just followed the old path. And slowly, over the next 30 years, the road crept forward again, not as a grand national project, but as 1,000 small efforts, each one driven by the same hunger that had started it all. The road reached the Mississippi River at last, not as a paved highway, but as a rough wagon track that ended at the ferry landing at East St. Louis. The ferrymen there had been waiting. They had seen the road coming for years, watching the traffic grow, watching the towns rise. They built bigger ferries. They built docks and warehouses. They built saloons and hotels. And when the first wagon rolled down the last slope to the riverbank, the ferryman did not even look up. He just waved the team aboard, collected his fee, and pushed off into the brown current. The road had reached the river, but the river was not the end. It was only the beginning. Across the Mississippi, the state of Missouri was waiting. Missouri in the 1840s was still the edge of the frontier. St. Louis was a booming city, a gateway to everything west. The road from the ferry docks led straight into the heart of the city, along Market Street, past the fur warehouses and the dry goods stores, past the blacksmith shops and the saloons. The wagons that came down the national road did not stop in St. Louis. They passed through. They crossed the city and kept going, heading west again, toward the Missouri River, toward the Kansas Plains, toward the Rocky Mountains, toward the Pacific. The national road had become the first link in a chain that would stretch all the way to the ocean. But that chain was not built by the government. It was built by the people who used it. The trail west from St. Louis was the Oregon Trail, the Santa Fe Trail, the California Trail. They all began on the national road. The road was the spine and the trails were the ribs. And just as the road had carried the early settlers to Ohio and Indiana and Illinois, now it carried their children to Oregon and California. The road did not stop. It just changed names. And as the decades passed, the road changed in other ways too. The iron horse came, snorting through the countryside, laying its own ribbons of steel. The railroad was faster, cheaper, more reliable. It could carry more people, more goods, more mail. The national road began to lose its importance. The stagecoaches stopped running. The taverns closed. The toll houses fell into disrepair. The road became a local road again, used by farmers to take their crops to the nearest rail depot. The great highway was quiet. The grass grew in the cracks. The mileposts leaned and crumbled. The road was forgotten. But the road was not dead. It was only sleeping. In the early 20th century, a new invention woke it up. The automobile, the horseless carriage, the gas buggy, the motor car. It needed roads, good roads, smooth roads, roads that did not turn to mud in the spring and dust in the summer. And the old national road was still there, a ready-made path across the country. The road was rediscovered. It was paved. It was straightened. It was widened. And in 1926, the federal government gave it a new name, US Route 40. Route 40 followed the old national road almost exactly. From Baltimore to St. Louis, the new highway traced the old line. The mileposts were gone, replaced by numbered signs. The toll houses were gone, replaced by gas stations. The taverns were gone, replaced by diners and motels. But the path was the same ridges, the same rivers, the same towns. The road was alive again, and what a life it was. The 1930s and 40s were the golden age of Route 40. The road was filled with cars, families on vacation, truckers hauling freight, salesmen in their sedans, migrants heading west to the promised land of California. The road hummed with energy. Every town along the route had a gas station, a diner, a motel. The signs were neon and bright. The food was hot and cheap. The rooms were clean and small. The road was a world unto itself, but the road was also a place of memory. The old people in the towns along Route 40 still remembered the wagons. They remembered the dust and the mud and the endless line of teams. They remembered the stories their grandparents had told them, about the first travelers, about the Indians, about the bears and the wolves. and now they watched the cars go by, and they knew that the road was still doing what it had always done. It was carrying people west. One of those towns was Zanesville, Ohio. Zanesville sits on the Licking River, at the point where the National Road crossed the Muskingum. In the 19th century, Zanesville was a pottery town. The clay along the river was perfect for making jugs and jars and plates. The road carried the pottery east and west. The town grew rich, but when the pottery industry declined, the town declined with it. Route 40 brought a new kind of life. The tourists stopped for gas. They bought souvenirs. They ate at the diner. The town survived. And then came the interstate. The interstate highway system, built in the 1950s and 60s, was designed for speed. It bypassed the towns. It cut straight across the countryside. The old road, the two-lane blacktop with its stoplights and its curves, could not compete. The traffic left Route 40. The gas stations closed. The motels went bankrupt. The diners locked their doors. The road was quiet again, but the road did not die this time. It became something else. A museum, a time capsule, a piece of history that you could drive on. In the 1970s and 80s, people began to rediscover the old road, not for its speed, for its stories. They drove slowly. They stopped at the abandoned motels and took pictures. They bought postcards at the antique shops. They ate at the diners that had somehow survived, run by old women who remembered the crowds. The road became a destination. Today, the National Road is a national scenic byway. It is marked with signs. There are museums along the route. There are festivals. There are people who drive the whole length of it, from Baltimore to St. Louis, just to see what it was like. They stop at the old toll houses. They walk across the ancient stone bridges. They read the plaques that tell the history. And they wonder what it must have been like to make that journey in a wagon when the road was new. But the road is not just a museum. It is still alive. It still connects the towns and the farms and the people. It still carries cars and trucks and bicycles. It still has diners that serve pancakes and coffee. It still has gas stations where the attendant comes out to pump your gas. It still has motels with neon signs that buzz in the night. The road is old, but it is not dead. It is waiting. It is always waiting. And the stories are still there. The stories of the travelers, the stories of the towns, the stories of the road itself. Every mile has 100 stories. Every bridge has 100 more. Every old farmhouse, every cemetery, every crossroads, every field. The road is a book, and you can read it by driving it. Consider the town of Washington, Pennsylvania. It sits on a hilltop, looking out over the valley of the Monongahela. The National Road came through Washington in the early days, and the town grew rich on the traffic. The inns were famous. The Lafayette Inn, the Globe Inn, the Sign of the Eagle. Travelers stopped there to rest their horses and themselves. They wrote in their journals. They argued about politics. They dreamed of the West. And then they moved on. The town still has those inns. They are museums now, or apartments, or just old buildings with peeling paint. But you can stand on the porch of the Lafayette Inn and look down the road, and you can almost hear the wagon wheels. Or consider the town of Brownsville, Pennsylvania. Brownsville is at the edge of the Allegheny Mountains, where the road begins its steep climb. In the old days, the wagoners would stop in Brownsville to buy extra supplies, to hire extra horses, to say a prayer. The town was a staging ground for the crossing. It had blacksmiths and wheelwrights and saddlers. It had saloons and churches. It had everything a traveler could need. And when the railroad came, Brownsville died. The road stopped being the main route. The town shrank, but it did not vanish. It sits there today, a ghost of its former self, with empty buildings and quiet streets. And the road still runs through it, a silent witness to all that was. Further west in Illinois, there is a town called Greenup. Greenup is not on the main line of the National Road. It is on a spur, a branch that led to the Wabash River. But Greenup has something special. It has a covered bridge. The bridge was built in the 1830s, at the same time the road was being built. It crosses the Embarrass River, a slow brown stream. The bridge is still there. You can drive through it. The wooden beams are dark with age. The roof is sagging, but it stands. It is the last covered bridge on the National Road. And when you drive through it, you are driving through history. The same sound of hooves on wood, the same creak of the timbers, the same shadow, the same light. And then there is Vandalia, where the road ended. Vandalia is still there. The old State House is a museum. The town is small and quiet. The road that comes into town is just a road. There is no grand monument, no sign that says, here the great national highway ended, but you can feel it. You can feel the weight of all those wagons that stopped here, all those travelers who looked west and wondered what was beyond. You can feel the disappointment and the hope, the end of the road, but also the beginning, because the road did not really end at Vandalia. It just changed. It became something else. It became a memory. And memories do not end. They linger. They wait. They whisper. And if you listen, you can hear them. On a quiet evening when the sun is low and the shadows are long, you can stand on the old road and you can hear the whispers. The creak of a wagon, the snort of a horse, the murmur of voices, a child laughing, a woman singing, a man cursing. All the sounds of 1,000 journeys, all the hopes and fears of 1,000,000 people. The road holds them all. It is a vessel of memory, and it is waiting for you to listen. So drive the road, walk the road, stand on the road. Let the road tell you its story, because the road is not just a path. It is a living thing, it has a heartbeat, it has a voice, and it has not finished speaking yet. The national road is still there, from the Atlantic to the Mississippi. It is still carrying travelers. It is still connecting people. It is still making the vast country smaller. The road is old. The road is worn. The road is full of potholes and cracks, but it is still a road, and every road is a story. And this story, the story of the forgotten highway that opened the American West, is not just about the past. It is about the present. It is about the future. Because every time a car drives down Route 40, the road is born again. Every time a family stops at a diner on the old national road, the history reawakens. Every time a child looks out the window of a car and sees the mileposts and the bridges and the towns, the dream continues. The road is not forgotten. It is only waiting. And now the road calls to us again. It calls from the mountains of Pennsylvania. It calls from the flatlands of Ohio. It calls from the prairies of Indiana and Illinois. It calls from the banks of the Mississippi. It calls from the edge of the West, and it asks us to remember the wagons and the oxen and the horses, to remember the men and women and children who walked that road, who suffered on that road, who dreamed on that road, to remember the road itself, the ribbon of stone and earth and history, because the road is us, and we are the road, and the journey never ends. Consider the labor that built this road. We speak of the national road as a monument to vision, to the ambition of a young nation, but it was also a monument to sweat, to muscle and bone. To men who swung picks and hauled stones from sunrise to sunset, week after week, year after year. These were not politicians or surveyors. They were laborers, Irish immigrants who had fled famine, free black men seeking wages and dignity, German farmers who needed work during the winter months. They gathered in camps along the route, living in rough shanties or canvas tents. They ate salt pork and hard bread. They drank whiskey and fought and cursed the mud. And they built the road with their hands. The work was brutal. The first engineers had surveyed a path, but the actual construction required clearing forests, blasting through rock, filling swamps, and laying stone in a foundation that would withstand the heaviest wagons. In the Alleghenies, the road had to be cut into steep hillsides. The workers used black powder to blast away ledges, then broke the stone with sledgehammers and fitted it together like a giant puzzle. Each mile of macadam required tons of crushed stone, carted from nearby quarries. The stone had to be broken by hand with hammers into pieces no larger than a man's fist. Men sat by the roadside, day after day, breaking stone. Their hands grew calloused, their backs ached. But they did it because the road meant progress, and progress meant a chance at a better life. Some of those workers never saw the West. They died of cholera, of typhoid, of accidents. A rockfall crushed them. A wagon overturned. They were buried in unmarked graves along the route, their names lost to history, but the road remembers them. The road was built on their sacrifice. Every mile of it is a memorial to the anonymous thousands who gave their strength so that others could travel. And then there were the teamsters, the men who drove the wagons. They were a breed apart, hard and profane, proud of their skill. They knew every rut of the road, every tavern, every blacksmith. They drove 6-horse teams, sometimes 8, hauling freight from Baltimore to the Ohio River. The trip took weeks. They slept under their wagons, ate cold beans, drank from streams. They fought off thieves and toll collectors. They cursed the mud that could swallow a wheel to the axle, but they also knew the road's beauty. The mist rising off the Yoyagheny River at dawn, the sound of a fiddle from a roadside inn. The sight of the mountains fading into the distance, one ridge after another, like the folds of a great blanket. The teamsters loved the road even as they hated it. The road was a teacher. For the thousands of families who traveled it in wagons, headed west, the journey was an education in hardship and hope. They learned to read the sky for weather. They learned to fix a broken wheel, to ford a river, to bargain for supplies. They learned that neighbors were strangers you could meet on the road, that kindness could be found in a cup of water or a hand with a heavy load. The road taught them patience. It taught them endurance. And it taught them that the West was not a place you simply arrived at, but a place you earned step by step, mile by mile. One of those families was the Rileys from Pennsylvania. The father, Thomas, had lost his farm to debt. He packed his wife and 5 children into a wagon hitched to 2 oxen. They carried flour, bacon, a pot, a few blankets. They joined a wagon train at Brownsville, heading for the Wabash country where land was cheap. The children walked most of the way because the wagon was too heavy with supplies. The youngest, a girl named Sarah, was 5 years old. She walked barefoot in the dust. She picked wildflowers and sang songs. She saw a dead horse by the road, its ribs showing, and she asked her mother if they would die too. Her mother said no, we will live. And they did. They settled near Terre Haute, built a cabin, survived the winter. Sarah grew up, married, had children. She told her grandchildren about the road. She told them about the day they crossed the Wabash River on a ferry, how the water was high and the oxen bellowed with fear. She told them about the kindness of a stranger who gave them a loaf of bread. The road was in her blood. It was in the blood of every family that made that journey. The road also carried darker cargo. The national road was a highway of slavery. In the early 19th century, slave owners brought chained men and women through the mountains, marching them west to be sold in the new cotton lands of Mississippi and Louisiana. The road saw the coffles, lines of human beings bound together, shuffling through the dust. The inns along the road sometimes had holding pens for slaves. The auction blocks stood in the town squares. There were voices too, whispered prayers from the enslaved, songs of sorrow that the road absorbed. The road does not forget. Stones remember the weight of chains. The shadows remember the tears. The national road is a road of America, and America carries the sin of slavery. To walk the road is to walk that history as well. Later, during the Civil War, the road became a military highway. The Union Army used it to move troops and supplies west. General Grant himself traveled on the national road when he was sent to command in the West. The road carried the wounded and the dead. It carried news of battles, victories, defeats. In the town of Cumberland, Maryland, the road became a staging area for the Army of the Potomac. Wagons filled with ammunition, barrels of pork, crates of rifles rolled through the streets. The citizens of Cumberland stood and watched, knowing that the road was taking their sons and husbands to war. Some of those men never came back. Their names are on the monuments in the town square. The road is quiet now, but if you listen at dusk, you can hear the beat of the drums. After the war, the road changed again. The railroads had already stolen the long-distance traffic, but the road still served local needs. Farmers used it to bring their crops to market. Doctors used it to visit patients. Preachers used it to ride circuit. The road became a neighborhood street, a county highway. It was still vital, still alive, but no longer a national artery. It was forgotten by the nation, but not by the people who lived along it. And then came the automobile. The road was reborn. In the early 1900s, motorists began to explore the old national road. They called it the National Old Trails Road. They drove in open touring cars, dust rising behind them, goggles on their faces. They stopped at the same inns that the wagoners had used, though now they drank gasoline instead of whiskey. The road was rough, unpaved in many places, but the drivers loved it. They loved the freedom. They loved the adventure. They loved the way the road wound through the hills and opened onto valleys. The road had a new purpose, pleasure. The automobile brought the tourist. Motels sprang up, mom-and-pop places with a neon sign and a row of cabins. Gas stations appeared, each with a single pump and a man in a cap who checked the oil and cleaned the windshield. Diners materialized, long and narrow, with chrome stools and a counter where you could get a hamburger and a milkshake. The road became a destination in itself. People drove it just to drive it. They called it the Main Street of America. One of those diners still stands in the town of Cambridge, Ohio. It is called the Donut Corner. It opened in 1937. The original owner, a Greek immigrant named George, made donuts by hand in a back room. The coffee was strong. The locals came for breakfast. The travelers came for a break. George worked behind the counter until he was 80 years old. When he died, his son took over, then his grandson. Today, the donuts are still made by hand. The coffee is still strong, and the road still runs past the door. You can sit at the counter and look out the window and see the cars go by, and you can imagine all the other travelers who sat in that same spot over the decades. The road gives you that gift, a connection to the past, made tangible in a cup of coffee and a donut. But the road is fragile. The old motels are crumbling. The neon signs have faded. Many of the diners have closed. The interstates have pulled the traffic away, and small towns have withered. The National Road is a living museum, but museums need caretakers. And the caretakers are the people who remember, the historical societies, the local volunteers, the descendants of those who built the road. They fight to preserve the bridges, the toll houses, the inns. They hold festivals. They give talks. They write books. They are the ones who keep the road alive. Today, there is a movement to designate the entire National Road as a National Heritage Area. Supporters say it would bring resources for preservation, for education, for tourism. They point to the success of other heritage routes like the Blue Ridge Parkway or the Great River Road. They argue that the National Road is not just a road, it is the story of America, and that story deserves to be told. But the road itself does not need a designation to be meaningful. It already is meaningful. Every time a family drives a section of it, they become part of that story. Every time a cyclist pedals the old route, they feel the gradients and the curves that the wagoners felt. Every time a child runs along the grass beside the pavement, they are running in the footsteps of Sarah Riley, the girl who walked barefoot to the Wabash. So the road continues. It is not forgotten. It is simply waiting for the next driver to take the exit off the interstate, to turn onto the two-lane blacktop, to slow down and see the world as it once was. The road is patient. It has time. It has the deep time of stone and soil, the long memory of the earth. And it will be here long after we are gone, still stretching from the Atlantic to the Mississippi, still carrying the stories of those who came before. If you ever have the chance, drive it, not the interstates, the old road. Start in Baltimore at the water's edge. Follow the signs west, go through the rolling hills of Maryland, cross the Potomac into West Virginia, then into Pennsylvania. Climb the Alleghenies, stop at the summit and look back, see how far you have come. Then descend into the Ohio Valley, across the flatlands of Indiana, through the cornfields of Illinois. End at the Mississippi, where the road meets the river. Stand on the bank, feel the water moving. And know that you have just driven the road that opened the West. That is a journey worth taking. The road is still there. It is always there. It is a part of the land, a part of the people, a part of the dream. And the dream is not over. The journey never ends, because every mile we drive is a mile we inherit. Every bridge we cross is a bridge our ancestors crossed. Every town we pass through is a town that once welcomed a stranger. And on a quiet evening, when the sun is low and the shadows are long, if you stand on the old road and listen, you will hear them. The whispers of all those who came before, the creak of a wagon, the snort of a horse, the murmur of voices, a child laughing, a woman singing, a man cursing. All the sounds of 1,000 journeys, all the hopes and fears of 1,000,000 people. The road holds them all. It is a vessel of memory, and it is waiting for you to listen. So drive the road, walk the road, stand on the road. Let the road tell you its story, because the road is not just a path. It is a living thing. It has a heartbeat. It has a voice, and it has not finished speaking yet. The National Road is still there, from the Atlantic to the Mississippi. It is still carrying travelers. It is still connecting people. It is still making the vast country smaller. The road is old. The road is worn. The road is full of potholes and cracks, but it is still a road, and every road is a story. And this story, the story of the forgotten highway that opened the American West, is not just about the past. It is about the present. It is about the future. Because every time a car drives down Route 40, the road is born again. Every time a family stops at a diner on the old National Road, the history reawakens. Every time a child looks out the window of a car and sees the mileposts and the bridges and the towns, the dream continues. The road is not forgotten. It is only waiting. And now the road calls to us again. It calls from the mountains of Pennsylvania. It calls from the flatlands of Ohio. It calls from the prairies of Indiana and Illinois. It calls from the banks of the Mississippi. It calls from the edge of the West. And it asks us to remember the wagons and the oxen and the horses, to remember the men and women and children who walked that road, who suffered on that road, who dreamed on that road. To remember the road itself, the ribbon of stone and earth and history, because the road is us, and we are the road, and the journey never ends. Each mile of the National Road today is a patchwork of memory and neglect. In some towns, the old brick storefronts still stand, their windows dark, their signs faded. In others, the road has been widened, straightened, and turned into a commercial strip lined with chain restaurants and big box stores. The character changes from county to county, from state to state. But if you know where to look, you can still find the road as it was. A few years ago, a historian named Carol set out to document every remaining milepost along the road. She drove from Baltimore to Vandalia, stopping at every marker she could find. Some were original, carved from limestone, their numbers barely legible. Others had been replaced by replicas, carefully crafted by local stonecutters. She mapped them, photographed them, and recorded their coordinates. She said the mileposts were like gravestones. Each one marked a point where someone had passed. Each one was a witness. In Washington County, Maryland, the road crosses the Conococheague Creek on a stone arch bridge built in 1830. The bridge is still in use. The stones are worn smooth by 2 centuries of wagon wheels and car tires. The creek below still runs clear. Carol stood on that bridge and felt the weight of history. She imagined the drovers crossing with their herds of cattle, the stagecoaches rattling over the stones, the families in their Conestogas, and she thought about how the bridge had outlasted them all. It was still here, still carrying travelers, still doing the job it was built to do. That bridge is one of dozens along the road. There are stone culverts, iron truss bridges, and timber-covered bridges. Each one is a piece of engineering history. Each one tells a story of the people who built it and the people who used it, but many of these structures are in danger. The stone arch bridges are vulnerable to erosion. The iron trusses are rusting. The timber bridges are rotting. Preservation is expensive and funding is scarce. The road needs champions. One such champion is a man named Tom, who runs a small museum in an old toll house in Pennsylvania. The toll house is a white stone building, 2 stories high, with a porch and a chimney. It sits right on the side of the road. Tom bought it in the 1970s when it was about to be demolished. He restored it himself, room by room, year by year. He filled it with artifacts, a Conestoga wagon jack, a drover's horn, a stagecoach lantern, a collection of old road signs. He gives tour for school groups and history buffs. He tells them about the toll collectors who lived in the building, about the rates they charged, about the arguments and the laughter and the constant flow of traffic. Tom's favorite story is about a toll collector named Ezra who worked the gate in the 1840s. Ezra was a small man, barely 5 feet tall, but he had a voice that could stop a horse. He could yell at a wagoner from a quarter-mile away and be heard clearly. He kept a ledger of every vehicle that passed, and that ledger survives today. In his spidery handwriting, he recorded the names of the travelers, the number of horses, the goods they carried, flour, whiskey, tobacco, iron, cloth. The ledger is a census of the road. It is a list of the living and the dead. Tom let me hold the ledger once. The pages were brittle, the ink brown. I could smell the dust of 2 centuries. I ran my finger along the names. John Smith, wagon of flour; Mary Jones, wagon of cloth; William Brown, wagon of whiskey. They were strangers, but I felt connected to them. The road had brought them to me. Tom said that is what the road does. It makes time collapse. It makes the past present. In the town of St. Clairsville, Ohio, the road passes through a historic district of houses built in the 1810s. One of them is the home of a woman named Ruth, who is 93 years old. She was born in that house. Her father was born in that house. Her grandfather built it. She has lived there her entire life, except for a few years when she went to college and then came back. She watched the road change from gravel to pavement, from wagon traffic to car traffic, from local route to interstate bypass. She remembers when the road was busy, when the motels were full, when the restaurants had lines out the door. Now the road is quiet. Most of the motels have been turned into apartments or torn down. The restaurants are closed. But Ruth still sits on her front porch every afternoon, watching the cars go by. She waves at the ones that slow down. She knows the neighbors, of course, but she also knows the road. She says the road has a rhythm. In the morning, it is eastbound traffic heading toward the city. In the evening, it is westbound, heading home. On weekends, it is families and tourists. On weekdays, it is trucks and locals. She can tell the time of day by the sound of the tires. Ruth's house is a museum of the road. In her living room, she has a framed oil painting of a Conestoga wagon crossing the Ohio River. In her kitchen, she has a collection of old license plates from every state in the Union. In her basement, she has a stack of faded postcards showing the road as it looked in the 1930s. She has never written a book or given a lecture. She is not a historian, she is just a keeper. She keeps the memory alive by sitting on her porch and watching. The National Road is not just a route from Baltimore to Vandalia. It is a network of stories. Every town along the road has its own history, its own characters, its own moments of drama and comedy. In Uniontown, Pennsylvania, the road passes the house where General Lafayette stayed in 1814. In Wheeling, West Virginia, the road crosses the suspension bridge built in 1849, the largest of its kind in the world at the time. In Springfield, Ohio, the road runs through the town square where Abraham Lincoln once spoke from the back of a wagon. In Richmond, Indiana, the road passes the depot of the Underground Railroad, where escaped slaves were hidden in a false-bottomed wagon. These are the places that make the road a living thing. They are not just dots on a map. They are the bones of the story. And every year, more people are discovering them. There is a growing interest in heritage tourism. People are tired of the interstates. They want to slow down. They want to see something real. They want to touch the past. The National Road Association has been working to promote the route as a destination. They have created a driving guide, a website, and a series of interpretive signs. They organize events like the National Road Yard Sale, where the whole route becomes a flea market, and the National Road Festival, where towns hold parades and reenactments. They have seen a steady increase in visitors. People come from all over the country and the world. They come to drive the road, to stay in the old motels, to eat at the diners, to walk the streets of the historic towns. One such visitor was a man from England named James. He had read about the National Road in a book about American roads. He booked a flight, rented a car, and drove the entire route from Baltimore to Vandalia. He said it was like driving through a novel. Every town had its own chapter. Every mile had its own paragraph. He took notes, he took pictures, he talked to the locals. He said the road was more authentic than any museum he had ever visited. That is the power of the road. It is not a reproduction. It is not a diorama. It is the real thing. The same road that carried the wagons now carries the cars. The same stones that were laid in the 183's rows are still under the asphalt. The same hills and valleys that tired the horses still slow the traffic. The road is a living artifact and it is still in use, but it is also fragile. The old inns are collapsing. The toll houses are rotting. The mileposts are cracking. The road needs attention. It needs money, yes, but it also needs love. It needs people who care enough to drive it, to photograph it, to tell its story. It needs the next generation of caretakers. There is a young woman named Alina who lives in a small town along the road in Illinois. She is 22 years old. She grew up hearing her grandmother's stories about the road. Her grandmother had a fruit stand by the side of the road in the 195's. She sold apples and peaches and homemade pies. The travelers would stop, buy a pie, and sit on the bench under the shade tree. They would talk about where they were going and where they had been. Alina's grandmother listened to their stories and remembered them. Now Alina is studying history in college. She is writing her thesis on the National Road. She has interviewed dozens of people like Ruth and Tom. She has walked the road, measured the bridges, photographed the landmarks. She hopes to one day work for the National Park Service, helping to preserve the road. She says the road is her heritage. It is part of who she is, and she is right. The National Road is not just a highway. It is a cultural inheritance. It belongs to every American, whether they know it or not. It shaped the country. It made the West possible. It connected the nation. And it is still here, waiting for someone to remember. So remember it, tell its story, share its lore, drive its miles, stop at its diners, walk its old bridges, listen to its whispers. The road is not forgotten, it is only resting. And when the time is right, it will wake again. The road is patient. The road is old. The road is full of cracks and potholes, but it is also full of beauty and memory. It stretches across the land like a scar and a blessing. It is the path of a nation. It is the story of America, and the story is not over. It will never be over, because every generation will discover the road anew. Every traveler will add their own chapter. Every child who looks out the window will see the land and dream. So drive the road. Walk the road, love the road, and know that you are part of something larger than yourself. You are part of the journey. You are part of the dream, the National Road, the Cumberland Road, the Old Pike, the Main Street of America. It has many names, but only one purpose: to take us west, to take us home, to take us to each other. And it is always there, waiting, calling, remembering. The road is still open.